Bruce, what's all the excitement today?
Oh my goodness, well, among other things, it's my birthday, but we're getting on the ART train and the brand new train station, the Brightline, to Fort Lauderdale Museum. I'm going to do a lecture there and see the great Frank Stella show. All right, well, there you go. Now, you can see that a lot of the passengers are already getting excited. I am too. But at any rate, it's going to be a wonderful day. In about 30 minutes, we're going to be in Fort Lauderdale. And later this afternoon, we come back on the ART train right back to beautiful downtown West Palm Beach. We'll be right back with some more details on this fabulous ART train trip. Wow, we're inside the train and we're on our way to Fort Lauderdale to view the Frank Stella Career Survey. This is reportedly one of the greatest shows in America. It's a show with over 300 paintings and sculptures. Extraordinary. But how do you get there? Well, we decided to take the train, and then after we see the show at the Fort Lauderdale Museum, I'll be doing my little lecture on my latest book, Chihuly, an Artist Collects. You know, a lot of people wonder what they could do on a Saturday. Some people, I guess, are interested in NASCAR, maybe others in mud wrestling. Myself, I'm after more cultural things. So I've got 2 tickets to paradise, I guess, as you could say, on our way to Fort Lauderdale. It's just wonderful, and we are having a great day. It's also my birthday, so I'm celebrating with my friends, my great assistant Trevor, my lovely, beautiful, talented wife Claudia, and we're really looking forward to a spectacular day. This is the way to go to Fort Lauderdale. 29 minutes, $10. That's what I'm saying. We'll be right back. Well, just reading up about Frank Stella here. We're at the NSU Art Museum of Fort Lauderdale. We are seeing one of, hands down, arguably, one of the most interesting shows in any museum in America at this moment. It also follows the almost impossible Ansel Keefer show that was here for many months with world renown. But here in this show, Experiment and Change, that's exactly what we're going to see. Frank Stella was a remarkable artist from the time he left graduate school at Princeton to about 3 years later showing in a group show at the Museum of Modern Art. It is a complete career retrospective survey where you're seeing large paintings, constructions, and even a lot of models. For those who think that somehow there may be some randomness in many ways to these paintings, all they need to do is go to the second floor and back into a total wall of extraordinary working drawings that were the small paper drawings for these very large compositions. And when you look through them, you see how well thought out the direction of his paintings were taking, all in the beginning based on geometric connecting the dots, and then later on, after he had the confidence and he had the character and certainly had the ambition, went on to, in fact, revolutionize many areas of painting and sculpture that had never been known before. So we're in for a big treat, and I am delighted to be here on this day, January 27th, 2018. Hi, Bruce Helander, and we're in front of the Fountain, 1992. It's a very interesting picture because it offers a viewer some secrets. You know, a lot of the three-dimensional paintings that we're going to see in this show, Frank Stella considered those to be paintings. not three-dimensional sculpture. So in this painting, curiously enough, it's as if he had smashed down one of these constructions, and as if some kind of giant roller went by the construction and smoothed it out. So really, when you look at this, it's almost as if it was a two-dimensional picture that was flattened out. And so I think the true nature of Frank Stella, whether it was two-dimensional or three-dimensional, still ended up being these engaging, complicated, wondrous paintings, and that's the story. Well, we're getting a chance to preview the Frank Stella career survey. 300 paintings and sculptures by one of America's best loved native sons. This is the kind of show that you could come back 2 or 3 or 4 times and not really absorb everything, even though many of the paintings are early minimal works, all the way up to his very complicated and engaging three-dimensional paintings, which for me are almost like collages, because it appears that he's picking out, just like Chamberlain, but more customized material, picking out things on a studio floor and positioning them and then welding them together. So really, are they paintings? Are they sculpture? Well, they seem to be both, but they sure are working. As I said, one of the fascinating aspects of Frank Stella's work is not only its color, not only its electrifying compositions, but in this case, its absolute grandeur. The works are big and bold and full of a remarkable confidence that Frank Stella started to develop while he was a student studying painting in Princeton. And then being highly influenced by activities in New York, particularly the artists that were associated with the Leo Castelli Gallery, and began to do these great minimal works. Why are these important? Well, they were the first ever. People couldn't really believe that a painter was getting away with in making pictures that were square, that were fine art, and that they were so I guess you'd have to say, electrifying. This is the Diderot Series, who was a remarkable artist that attended and taught at Rhode Island School of Design. I'm delighted that I had 1 year with him. I'm not sure what the connection is, but I think in looking at these works, they're not only exciting, but they're contemplative, they're exacting. They are a very particular nature, the way this artist put these together. And if you're doing minimal work and you're doing large-scale paintings, they better be perfectly painted. Now we're going to look at some work by Frank Stella that a lot of people feel is his most idiosyncratic work, perhaps his most memorable, certainly the most confident. Frank Stella made a great breakthrough where he started to do three-dimensional paintings that use the kind of exciting combinations of paint, but then he transformed it into these wonderful, I guess you'd call them wall sculptures. In this case, this is called the Moby Series, and he did for a couple of years paintings from Moby Dick and from several passages of this great story. In this case, the most amazing breakthrough, and that's why these pictures inevitably may be his crowning glory, is that he was able to transform the geometric properties of his paintings, put them back in with this sort of haphazard, seemingly haphazard design, lots of risk-taking, a charisma that you can feel, and then all of a sudden the canvases came down and he started, if you look closely, these are back, they're very heavy, they're very engaging, but these are among the most inventive of that period. We're back to take another look at one of Frank Stella's courageous assemblages. These are made with metal and aluminum. I believe it's called the Circuit Series. I mean, nobody really knows where these titles came from. You know, Olitsky used to take titles coming off the radio, basically to identify them. This is a non-narrative painting, for heaven's sakes, so really whatever title you put to it is very difficult to have a title relate to what the work is doing. This is a multiple layered composition where I think, and also myself as an artist, a lot of this is a kind of extemporaneous decision-making process where you take one component and then you balance it with another, and you become this a terrific electricity coming out of these paintings. There's another odd circumstance with this work, is you see that a lot of the drawing over the painting seems to be just sort of, as I said, in a kind of haphazard way. And I think for Frank Stella, if you look closely, that notion of not being too serious, not being, and indeed, there's that word again, haphazard, where it appears that all of these gestures were just moving right along. However, it ain't so haphazard when you look at the composition and you look at this very identifiable thumbprint that Frank Stella puts on his work. That's why the show is so amazingly important and I think memorable. We're taking a closer look at some of these amazing paintings that must be 14 or 15 feet tall. But the incredible thing, when you look very, very closely, is you can see the way Frank Stella actually used a pencil to find these guidelines. Then he's overlapped certain kinds of material, like I said, in a very distinctive, surprising collage aesthetic. And then in many cases, if you look carefully, he's got a little bit of spray paint through here, which clearly makes these shapes more three-dimensional. You know, an artist has a limited bag of inventive tricks, and that's not a negative word, but an artist in many ways has to find a way to hold a creative note, I guess as long as you can possibly hold that. And so with a canvas, in order to hold a creative note for as long as you can, you've got to come up with as many different kinds of forms that keeps the viewer interested as well as the artist. So in many cases, you see a kind of a disparate collection of shapes and so on. But when we take a look at this painting from a distance, you'll start to see that these shapes are going directly into the next painting using the same shadow technique, using the same sort of interesting painterly application to what he's done. You can, if you look closely, you start to see where he's considered kind of fixing up these areas and where a drip is there. He is obviously happy with that, or he would have wiped it away. It's always funny where someone comes up and they say, "Yeah, Mr. Helander, you realize there's a drip there in the bottom left-hand corner?" Well, an artist knows about, I know a lot of drips in my life, but I can recognize a drip on my painting that's either a good one or a bad one. Here the painting continues. Much of this, it is really pretty amazing when you think that some of these gestures might have been random. They're not random. They're well planned. You can see the pencil marks. You can see the artist's mind at work. You can see the kind of saturation that he's decided to put together. And if you look at an area like this, which is a kind of a, I don't know, it's a sort of a square dance with round forms, I guess you'd say. It's really continues to be a breakthrough process in painting. And that was the other thing that Frank Stella and all really, truly great contemporary painters always seem to find the next step. Whether it's Jasper Johns, whether it was Rosenquist, bless his soul, all of these folks were interested in finding a next new thing, or what was right around the corner. And the only way to find that was not in a plan, it was through trial and error. And like Evel Knievel says, where there's no risk, there's no reward. So as you can see from a background, you get a much better perspective of what we were talking about. With 1, 2, 3, 4 huge canvases, from back here, you start to get the perspective about how everything fits together. Usually an artist like Frank Stella will put together these drawings, almost a kind of cartoon theory of putting down your thoughts and then trying to figure out how you're going to make them this big. I mean, it's a remarkable task, and it's a remarkable outcome of all of these shapes going in different directions that still have a kind of ironic visual harmony that is easy to detect, and my goodness, wonderful to enjoy. Here's a painting by Frank Stella from 2001. It's a painting that clearly shows that Frank Stella is always willing to take a risk and take the next step. This is a painting that's completely different from any other pictures that he did, but he clearly has decided to chip away, to overpaint this hundreds of times, and it's come up with something that is completely different. But you know what's amazing with Frank Stella, even if he does an incredibly different painting, or he does a minimal picture, or he does these wonderful constructions, they're instantly recognizable. Idiosyncratic, I guess, is the best word to use in the art world, but that's exactly the way they are. What made Frank Stella such an interesting artist, such a celebrated artist, was his vision, his ambition, and his willing to experiment in all kinds of different directions. That's Frank Stella. I'm here with Steve Manolis, a celebrated painter in Miami with one of the great legendary studios there. I have followed his career, and Stephen is also enjoying this great Frank Stella show. But you just mentioned a minute ago about the scale and the fact that most of these paintings wouldn't fit into a house. What are your observations on that, Stephen?
Well, my observations are, and then it's incredulous to me, is that from the beginning, he painted in a scale that could never fit in anyone's home. And he's such an intellect and such a philosopher that you must ask yourself what was in his mind. And what was in his mind was the museum, the heavens, the grandiosity, okay, of what he was expressing right from the first moment. And I think that's extraordinary, because most artists follow a sort of sequential process. Their works can and sometimes get bigger. If they know they're going to have a museum show, they want to paint for the museum show. In the case of Stella, it's self-obvious by backwardization that it was from the first moment.
Well, that's a very interesting observation, especially when you come into a great museum here in Fort Lauderdale, and these are big, tall walls, and he's filling them up. I think, interestingly enough, Stephen, that your observation, when you create these paintings, he's not wondering where they're going to go or if they're going to fit in the marketplace. He was just filled in a robust appetite for making big, large, remarkable pictures. Whether they were going to find a home, whether they were going to fit, he had a direction, and I think it all worked out.
I think that's exactly right. But my comment would be, he didn't paint these works so somebody could see them. He painted these works so you could experience them.
Absolutely.
And that's what I'm doing here this afternoon. I'm experiencing this art. It's awesome.
Well, I think everybody else is having quite an experience here as well. It's just a great show, and thanks for coming.